the center of the obsidian hall. High above, the air shimmered with the static of 1,000 security drones, but the only sound was the sharp, rhythmic click of metal boots on stone. The most powerful woman in the sector, a figure of cold glass and sharp edges, was abandoning her throne to whisper his name. Do you think a single memory can outweigh a galactic empire? Join us as we explore the threads that bind the smallest moments to the fate of stars. Now, let's look back at where this began. 15 years ago, the only thing Elias had to worry about was the failing moisture vaporizers in the dustlands. Life was a slow rotation of red sand and rusted iron until he found her. She was huddled near the iron spring, her skin the color of starlight and her eyes glowing with a soft, bioluminescent hum that defied the harsh suns. He didn't call the authorities. Instead, he brought her water in a chipped ceramic mug. Elias spent his afternoons teaching the girl Lyra how to navigate the complexities of being human. He showed her how to brew tea from dried desert scrub and how to listen for the arrival of the monsoons. But most of all, he taught her about the solar moths. They were tiny, fragile creatures that lived for only a single day, glowing brilliantly before fading into the dust. Elias would catch them in an old glass specimen jar. He'd hold it up, watching the golden light dance against Lyra's silver hair, explaining that their lives weren't tragic because they were short. They were precious because they didn't last. It turned out that Lyra was learning more than just customs. She was recording the feeling of a world that didn't demand she be a weapon. One evening, as the three suns dipped below the horizon, Lyra sat with the jar in her lap. She watched a moth flutter against the glass. Elias noticed her hands were trembling. He didn't ask why. He simply sat beside her, letting the silence of the frontier act as a bridge between two species that should never have met. Have you ever found beauty in something you knew wouldn't last? The peace shattered when the hegemony ship arrived. It didn't land. It simply erased the sky, a massive needle of black glass piercing the atmosphere. Lyra was taken, not with violence, but with a terrifying, formal inevitability. She didn't look back until she reached the ramp. In that moment, the Empress was just a girl in a dusty tunic, her eyes wet with a very human grief. Elias stayed in the dustlands for years, but the silence was different after she left. He threw himself into linguistics, obsessed with the idea that if he could understand the way the universe spoke, he might find a way to speak to her again. He became a specialist for the interstellar Concord, a man who translated peace into the languages of war. The diplomatic mission to the Obsidian hegemony was supposed to be his final assignment. As the doors to the throne room swung open, the air grew cold, smelling of ozone and ancient stone. The Empress sat atop a spire of volcanic rock, her face hidden behind a mask of shifting liquid metal. She looked like a god, but as Elias stepped forward to present the Concord's credentials, the mask dissolved. The woman beneath it didn't look like a conqueror. She looked like she was drowning in her own power. The obsidian hall grew deathly still. Lyra stood before him, the distance between them vanishing as she ignored the gasps of her high-ranking advisors. Elias watched her throat move as she swallowed, a small, fragile gesture that betrayed the weight of her crown. "Elias," she breathed. The reunion was shattered before the first tear could fall. A bolt of superheated plasma hissed through the air, aimed at the Empress's back. In a blur of silver and kinetic energy, Lyra didn't duck. She pivoted, her hand snapping out to catch the projectile in a magnetic field generated by her gauntlet. She crushed the energy like a dying moth. Betrayal. The hall erupted. The assassins were from the Old Blood faction, traditionalists who loathed her soft leanings toward foreign diplomacy. They were subdued within minutes, forced to their knees before the throne. The air tasted of ozone and the metallic tang of fear. According to the hegemony's 10,000-year-old tradition, The punishment for high treason was the total erasure of the conspirators' lineages. Lyra's eyes flickered with a cold, ancient light. She looked at the blade in her hand, then at the trembling families of the men who had just tried to kill her. "Wait," Elias said, his voice echoing against the vaulted ceiling. He stepped forward, ignoring the weapons leveled at his chest. "There is another way. An ancient law from your own archives, the law of earned judgment." Lyra hesitated. Under the silence of 300 observers, the linguist explained that the value of a leader wasn't found in the blood they spilled, but in the time they granted to those who had none. He spoke of the solar moths. He reminded her that the beauty of her reign would be measured by its mercy, not its duration. But the traditionalists were not moved by poetry. Civil war erupted in the streets of the capital that night. The hegemony stood on the brink of shattering. Inside the command center, the human government officials were panicked, ready to withdraw. Elias stood his ground. He convinced the Concord to broadcast a single message to the hegemony fleet, a bluff of military intervention so massive it bordered on insanity. He told them humanity would burn their own stars to save one friend. The hegemony generals hesitated. They looked at the humans beings who lived barely a century, yet acted as if they owned eternity. To the long-lived aliens, this irrationality was more terrifying than any weapon. They stood down, paralyzed by the fear of what a species that fought for a feeling might actually do. And now, in the quiet aftermath of the reform, Elias stood at the airlock of his departing ship. Lyra approached him, her regal robes replaced by a simple traveling cloak. She held out a glass specimen jar. Inside was no moth, but a bioluminescent creature from her home world, its wings pulsing with a slow, steady rhythm. "It will only live for a week," she said, her voice finally steady. "I chose it because you were right. It is beautiful because it ends." Elias took the jar, his fingers brushing hers. The cold glass felt warm from her touch. He looked at the creature, a small light in the vast dark theater of the galaxy, and realized that the memory of a single summer had finally outlasted an empire of stone. He turned toward the stars, the light of a short life glowing in his palm. Which is more powerful, a law written in blood, or a memory held in a jar? If this journey into the heart of the hegemony moved you, join us by subscribing for more Chronicles of the Stars. We'll be here tomorrow with another story of the things that endure.